The planet of Zephyria glimmered like a jewel in the dark void of space. Its surface was covered with shining crystal forests, floating lakes of glowing liquid, and skies that shifted in color with the passing of each hour. This world was ruled by Princess Liara, a young alien of extraordinary composure. Her movements were precise, her voice calm, and her presence so serene that even the most unruly of advisors paused to listen when she spoke. She was admired across Zephyria for her wisdom and grace, and her calm demeanor seemed unshakable. Liara walked along the crystal corridors of her palace, her long robes brushing softly against the floor. She had just finished a meeting with her council regarding trade negotiations with neighboring systems. Everything was orderly, as it always was. She liked it that way. The palace was her sanctuary, a place where every sound and movement had its place. Far above Zephyria, a small human ship cut through the vacuum of space. It had been damaged during a patrol mission and was now badly off course. Inside, Ethan, a human soldier, struggled with the controls. Sweat lined his brow, though in space it seemed almost symbolic rather than necessary. With one final push, the ship broke through Zephyria's atmosphere, crash landing on the outskirts of a glowing crystal forest. The impact sent tremors across the nearby cliffs, and small crystal shards tumbled into the river of light that ran beneath the forest. Ethan groaned as he climbed out of the damaged ship. His uniform was scuffed, and his helmet had a noticeable crack, but he was alive. He looked around in awe. The planet was like nothing he had ever seen. The crystals reflected the twin suns in patterns that dazzled his eyes, and the floating lakes gave off a soft, soothing glow. Ethan shook his head. "I have no idea where I am," he muttered, though there was a hint of wonder in his voice meanwhile. Liara had been informed of the crash through the palace's monitoring system. She observed the human carefully from the palace observation deck. His movements were clumsy yet confident, a combination that piqued her curiosity. Most visitors to her world approached with caution and careful manners, but this human seemed unafraid of the unknown. Liara's personal guard, a team of highly trained Zephyrian warriors, reported the situation in their calm, measured tones. "Princess, an unknown life form has entered our atmosphere. It has landed near the northern crystal forest. It appears unharmed. Observe him," Liara said, her voice steady. "Do not interfere unless necessary." She turned away from the observation panel and walked toward her private quarters. Even in situations that might unsettle others, she remained poised. Ethan wandered deeper into the forest, examining the glowing flora. He had never seen anything like it. Some of the crystals hummed softly when touched, while others released tiny sparks of light. His curiosity got the better of him, and he reached out to touch one. The hum intensified, and a small shock made him jump back. "Ho," he muttered, chuckling to himself. "Okay, definitely not Earth." As he explored, he noticed a river of flowing light. Without thinking, he attempted to step across using a series of floating crystal stones. Halfway across, one stone wobbled, and he nearly fell into the luminous water. Just as he regained his balance, he heard a soft, melodic voice behind him. "You are far from home." "Human," the voice said. Ethan froze. He turned to see Princess Liara standing at the edge of the forest path. She was even more striking in person, her calm eyes fixed on him, her posture perfect. Her robes shimmered softly in the glowing light, and her presence seemed to radiate authority. Hello," Ethan said, scratching the back of his head. "I didn't mean to. I wasn't expecting anyone." Liara's expression did not change. She observed him quietly, her calm aura almost intimidating. Ethan, despite his usual confidence, felt a nervous flutter in his chest. There was something about her, something serene yet commanding, that made him pause. "You are unharmed?" she asked, her voice gentle but precise. "Yes." "I'm fine," Ethan replied. "My ship, it kind of crashed." He gestured vaguely toward the forest edge. Liara inclined her head slightly. "I see. You are fortunate. Zephyria is not unkind, but it can be unpredictable for those unprepared." Ethan nodded, unsure how to respond. "Yeah, I guess I can see that." Liara studied him a moment longer, noticing the way he moved, how he surveyed the surroundings with cautious interest. Unlike most visitors, he did not bow. He did not offer formal greetings. And he did not attempt to hide his curiosity. She found herself intrigued by his behavior. For the first time in many cycles, her calm mind was slightly unsettled. "You will come with me," Liara said finally. "It is not safe for you to wander alone." Ethan blinked. "Oh, sure. I mean, okay." The walk back to the palace was quiet at first. Ethan tried to take in every detail of the alien world around him. He noticed how the air shimmered faintly as if carrying light itself, and how the trees, though crystalline, seemed to move gently as though breathing. Liara walked ahead, her posture flawless, her movements deliberate. She did not speak unless necessary, and Ethan quickly realized that this quiet observation was her way of understanding him. "So, you're a princess?" Ethan asked after a moment, trying to break the silence. Liara's eyes flicked briefly to him. "Yes, Princess Liara, and you are Ethan." "Human soldier Ethan," he said, offering a hand awkwardly. Liara merely inclined her head in acknowledgement. Ethan realized that matters here were different, but the princess's calm nature was disarming. He felt comfortable speaking honestly, even as he noticed a slight change in her expression, a flicker, almost imperceptible, of curiosity, perhaps even amusement. The palace gates were tall and elegant, built from translucent crystal that reflected the light of Zephyria's twin suns. The guards greeted Liara with the usual disciplined nods, and Ethan followed silently, trying not to draw attention to himself. Yet, despite the formal atmosphere, he could sense that Liara was observing him closely. Inside the palace, everything was orderly. Servants moved gracefully, tending to tasks with quiet efficiency. The walls shimmered faintly, reflecting the natural light and patterns that seemed almost alive. Ethan could not hide his awe. "You may rest in the guest chambers," Liara said, guiding him down a hallway. "You will need to recover from your journey. The ship, we will examine later." "Thanks. I really appreciate it," Ethan replied. He could not stop glancing around, marveling at the alien architecture. "This place, it's incredible." Liara remained calm. "You will find Zephyria is full of wonders, but you must also learn caution. Not all creatures or locations here are as harmless as they seem." Ethan nodded, though he suspected he would discover that lesson in time. "Yeah, I'm starting to see that." Once in the guest chambers, Ethan sank onto a soft bed, exhausted but still alert. He looked out the window at the glowing forests and floating lakes. Something about this place felt alive, as if the planet itself was watching him. Outside the chamber, Liara lingered for a moment, silently observing the human who had suddenly disrupted the calm order of her world. She found herself thinking about his courage, his candor, and the way he moved through her palace with a mixture of awe and fearlessness. For the first time, she felt her carefully maintained composure shift slightly. Ethan, unaware of the impact he had made, drifted into a restless sleep, dreaming of alien skies and floating crystal lakes. Liara returned to her quarters, her mind unusually active. She could not stop thinking about the human soldier, his directness, his unpredictability, and how, in small ways, he had begun to unsettle her calm. As night fell on Zephyria, the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the palace in a soft, multicolored glow. The planet hummed with life, and the princess, usually serene and unshakable, found herself quietly curious about the human who had arrived unexpectedly. She could not predict how his presence would change her world or herself, but for the first time in her life, she felt a faint, thrilling sense of uncertainty, and that uncertainty, though small, was enough to make Liara feel unexpectedly flustered. The next morning, the palace of Zephyria was bathed in a soft golden glow from the twin suns. Crystal walls shimmered faintly, reflecting light and patterns that made the corridors feel alive. Princess Liara moved gracefully through the halls, her usual calm expression firmly in place. Yet inside, she could not stop thinking about the human soldier. Ethan, meanwhile, had already begun exploring the palace, much to the quiet concern of the guards. He was fascinated by everything: the floating crystal staircases, the glowing plants that responded to touch, and the soft hum that seemed to resonate through the palace walls. "Wow, he muttered as he brushed his hand along a translucent railing. This is incredible. One of Liara's guards, a tall alien named Coral, approached cautiously. Human, please remain within the permitted areas. The princess has requested that you do not wander alone. I know, Ethan said quickly, holding up his hands. I'm just seeing. I promise I won't cause trouble. Coral gave a small, almost imperceptible nod and moved away. Ethan grinned. For a human used to strict rules, this palace was a puzzle he wanted to solve. In every corner he turned seemed to reveal wonders beyond imagination. Liara, observing him from a distance, noticed how different his presence felt compared to her usual visitors. He was loud at times, unafraid of asking questions that most would consider disrespectful, and he reacted with visible surprise to even small things. Normally, she could predict the behavior of diplomats, traders, and travelers, but Ethan was unpredictable, and strangely, she found herself intrigued. Later, in the palace library, a vast hall filled with floating holographic texts and crystal-bound books. Ethan tried to read about Zephyria's culture. He leaned over a glowing console, tapping at the controls, sending a holographic map of the planet spiraling in front of him. Liara appeared behind him silently, her footsteps making no sound on the polished floor. You are curious, she said softly. Almost a statement rather than a question. Ethan jumped slightly, turning to face her. Oh, Princess Liara, I didn't hear you come in. Liara's expression remained calm, but her eyes held a faint sparkle of amusement. Curiosity is not forbidden, but respect is expected. I get that, Ethan said, scratching the back of his neck. I want to understand your world. It's amazing, Liara nodded. She did not interrupt him, allowing him the freedom to explore and speak. His candor, so different from her usual visitors, made her feel unsettled in a way she did not fully understand. Ethan's exploration soon led him to the palace kitchen, where alien chefs were preparing meals using glowing ingredients and floating utensils. One of the chefs looked up in alarm as Ethan leaned over to watch a small sphere of light levitate and change colors. Careful, the chef warned in a melodic tone. That is a Zephyrian Lumai crystal. It is fragile. Ethan grinned sheepishly. Right, got it. He reached out to touch it anyway, and the sphere flickered, sending a small spark of light across the room. The chefs gasped, but the princess appeared just in time. Ethan, Liara said calmly, but there was a hint of exasperation in her tone. You must follow guidance. You cannot interact with everything as if it is ordinary. Sorry, he said, stepping back. I didn't mean to. Liara held up a hand. It is not about intent. It is about understanding your surroundings. She turned slightly and left, but Ethan noticed a subtle change in her postural stiffness that suggested she had felt concern, perhaps even alarm, for the first time since she became princess. The day continued with small lessons in Zephyrian etiquette. Ethan was introduced to the concept of telepathic greetings, where the mind and feelings were shared briefly instead of spoken aloud. He fumbled the first attempt, accidentally projecting a mental image of his breakfast instead of a greeting. The princess, observing politely, raised a brow, her calmness challenged by the humor of the mistake. Interesting, she said finally, maintaining her usual composed tone. But internally, she was quietly amused and slightly flustered. Humans were unpredictable, and she was realizing just how different this one was. Over the next few hours, Ethan asked questions about everything from the floating lakes to the rules of Zephyrian politics. His directness was unusual. Most visitors tiptoed around delicate subjects, but Ethan spoke with curiosity and honesty. Princess, if a human wanted to help your people, what would they do? He asked one afternoon, leaning on the crystal balcony railing, his eyes following the floating islands in the distance. Liara studied him. His question was bold, straightforward, and sincere. She rarely received such questions, and she felt her calm facade flicker slightly. Aid is not a simple matter, she said carefully. It requires understanding our ways, our customs, and our responsibilities. It is not enough to act without thought. I think I can do that, Ethan said simply. His sincerity was refreshing, but it made her heart beat a little faster than usual. She quickly reminded herself that she must remain composed later. A minor incident occurred in the palace gardens. A young Zephyrian student playing near the glowing fountain slipped and nearly fell into the water. Without hesitation, Ethan reached out, catching the child just in time. Liara, observing from a distance, felt her chest tighten slightly. The human had acted instinctively, without concern for rules or etiquette, and yet his actions had been precise and correct for the first time. She realized that this human possessed qualities she had not seen in her own people: courage, honesty, and spontaneity. She found herself questioning why she felt, and settled. It was not anger, it was not fear, it was curiosity. And more than curiosity, it was a feeling she did not yet understand. By evening, Ethan was invited to dine with Liara in the palace's grand hall. The room glowed softly with ambient light, and the air was filled with a gentle hum from the crystal walls. Ethan tried to adapt to the alien customs, though he struggled at times, making small mistakes that would have mortified most visitors. Liara, observing quietly, allowed a small smile to form and seen by others. "You are unlike any human I have known," she said during the meal. Her voice was steady, but there was a subtle warmth underneath. "I get that a lot," Ethan replied with a grin. "I guess I'm—" Liara's eyes met his, and for a moment, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that this human could challenge not only her world, but her own sense of control. She quickly pushed the thought aside, maintaining the calm that defined her. After dinner, Liara led him to a small observation deck that overlooked the floating lakes. The twin suns were setting, casting long shadows across the glowing landscape. Ethan leaned on the railing, awestruck by the view. "This place, it's like a dream," he said softly. Liara stood beside him, silent for a moment. "Zephyria is a place of order," she said, her voice steady. "It is also a place of beauty. But beauty alone is not enough. One must respect it, understand it, and protect it." "I'll try," Ethan said. "I really will." Liara's calm exterior remained, but inwardly, she felt a faint flutter sensation she had not experienced in years. The human beside her, through his honesty, bravery, and curiosity, had begun to pierce the calm she maintained so carefully. As the stars began to appear in the twin night skies, Ethan looked at her and smiled. "Princess Liara, you're amazing." Liara's breath caught ever so slightly. She looked away, focusing on the distant lights of her city, trying to regain her composure. No one had ever spoken to her with such admiration and simplicity before, and yet it felt genuine. Ethan, oblivious to the inner turmoil he had caused, turned his attention to the glowing rivers below. Liara remained silent, observing him. For the first time, she realized that the calm, ordered world she had always known could be disrupted not by enemies or disasters but by a single, unpredictable human. And though she would not admit it to anyone, not even herself, she was quietly flustered. A few days after Ethan's arrival, the palace of Zephyria had grown used to the presence of the human soldier. The guards remained alert, but they had begun to notice how Ethan moved through the halls without fear, talking freely with servants and examining the glowing walls with curiosity. He had a way of observing that was different from anyone Liara had ever met, and she found herself watching him more often than she would have admitted. That morning, Liara had gathered her advisors in the grand hall to discuss a troubling development. A sudden shift in the floating lakes had been detected, crystals breaking away from their normal orbits, sending fragments into the surrounding forests. Normally, this was a rare natural phenomenon, but the readings suggested interference. Something or someone was affecting the balance of Zephyria's delicate ecosystem. Liara's calm voice carried across the room. "This is unusual. We must investigate and restore order immediately." One of the senior advisors, a tall, blue-skinned Zephyrian named Orin, spoke cautiously. "Princess, this could be dangerous. The floating lakes are home to creatures that react unpredictably to disruption. It is not safe for humans to enter." Liara's gaze shifted toward Ethan, who had been quietly observing the discussion. "He will accompany us," she said, her tone firm. The advisors looked shocked. Ethan has proven himself brave and resourceful. His perspective may be valuable. Ethan blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. Me? Oh, okay. I mean, sure, I can help, he said, straightening his posture with a mix of pride and nervousness. Liara did not comment. She simply moved toward the palace entrance, signaling the beginning of the expedition. Ethan followed, trying to keep pace with the graceful steps of the princess outside. The crystal forest shimmered in the morning light. Liara's entourage included her elite guards and Orin, who carried a device capable of analyzing energy fluctuations in the lakes. Ethan marveled at everything: the floating lakes, the luminous creatures, and the patterns of light that danced across the crystal trees. It's beautiful, he whispered, careful not to disturb the delicate balance of the forest. Liara glanced at him, her usual calm expression intact, but her mind was alert. Ethan's fascination was endearing, but she could not afford distraction. Stay focused, human. The imbalance could pose a threat to both the wildlife and the palace if left unchecked. They reached the largest of the floating lakes, its surface glowing softly under the twin suns. Small crystal fragments drifted in the air, reflecting light like tiny stars. The readings on Orin's device indicated a powerful energy source deep within the lake, one that did not belong naturally. Something is causing the disruption, Orin said. It may be intentional. Ethan crouched by the edge of the lake, examining the glowing water. It looks like some kind of energy field. Could it be machinery? Liara stepped closer. Possibly, but we must approach with caution. The creatures that inhabit these waters are sensitive to vibrations. Any sudden movement could provoke them. Ethan nodded, trying to steady his breathing. Though he had faced danger before, this was unlike anything he had encountered. He glanced at Liara, whose calmness never wavered. Watching her, he felt both reassured and slightly nervous. Her composure was a shield, but he sensed the faint tension beneath it. Her attention was divided between the task and him. Suddenly, a loud splash echoed across the lake. Several glowing creatures, larger than Ethan had imagined, leapt from the water, their translucent bodies flashing in the sunlight. They moved toward the group, wings extended, eyes glowing with curiosity and caution. Step back, Liara commanded calmly, though her eyes narrowed slightly. The guards raised their weapons, prepared to defend. Ethan, however, stepped forward instinctively. Wait, maybe they're just curious, he said. He reached out slowly, mimicking the creatures' movements. To everyone's surprise, the creatures paused, hovering in the air as if assessing him. Liara felt a flicker of alarm. Humans were unpredictable, and Ethan's bravery bordered on recklessness. Yet, the creatures did not attack. Instead, they seemed to respond to his calm determination. Allowing the group to move closer to the source of the disturbance, Orin activated the analyzer, sending a beam of energy into the lake. The machine hummed, highlighting the exact location of the disruption. A small, mechanical device rested on a submerged crystal platform, pulsing with an unnatural energy. Ethan glanced at it. I can get it, he said, already moving toward the lake's edge. Liara's eyes widened slightly. Human, be careful. One wrong move could trigger a reaction. I've got this, he said with a confident grin. Trust me. Before Liara could stop him, Ethan waded into the shallow water, reaching for the device. The creatures watched closely, their glowing bodies shifting in unison. The energy field round the device sparked, sending ripples through the water. Ethan grabbed it and lifted it out carefully, holding it in both hands. A wave of relief swept over Liara. She could not help the faint smile that touched her lips. Ethan had acted instinctively, yet skillfully, and the imbalance was neutralized. The creatures, sensing no threat, retreated gracefully to the depths of the lake. Well done, Liara said softly, her voice betraying a hint of admiration. She had remained calm, but inside, she felt a flutter she could not quite place. Ethan, wiping water from his hands, gave a modest shrug. Just doing what anyone would do, he said. Though his eyes sparkled with pride, Liara studied him for a moment, realizing that his courage and quick thinking had not only resolved the crisis, but had also challenged her own sense of control. She had faced many situations requiring diplomacy and strategy, but Ethan's human unpredictability had brought a new dimension to her world, one she had not expected. As they made their way back to the palace, the group walked in relative silence. Ethan occasionally glanced at Liara, sensing her observation. She, in turn, noticed the way he carried himself, curious, brave, and unapologetically human. Later, in the palace gardens, Liara invited Ethan to walk with her. The floating flowers shimmered under the soft light, releasing faint aromas that mingled in the air. "You acted well today," she said, her tone calm but thoughtful. Ethan smiled. "Thanks, I just did what I thought was right. Honestly, I didn't think about it much." Liara tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "There is value in instinct. Too often, we rely solely on analysis and control. You remind me of something I have long forgotten." Ethan looked at her curiously. "Really? What's that?" She did not answer immediately. Instead, she led him to a bench near a glowing pond. "The courage to act without fear of perfection," she said softly. "To move forward even when the outcome is uncertain." Ethan's smile widened. "I guess humans are good at that. We make mistakes a lot, but we try anyway." Liara allowed a faint laugh, a sound rare and musical. She had remained composed in public for so long, yet with Ethan, she felt comfortable enough to let a small part of herself show. The day ended with the two of them standing on the observation deck, watching the twin suns set over the floating lakes. The air shimmered with light, and the palace seemed to hum in quiet harmony. "You are different from anyone I have met," Liara said finally, her voice steady but softer than usual. Ethan shrugged, grinning. "I get that a lot. But you're amazing. Calm, smart. Everything here is incredible." Liara's breath caught slightly, and she turned to face the horizon. She did not respond immediately. Her calm exterior was intact, but inwardly, she realized she had been affected in ways she had never expected. Ethan, unaware of the quiet turmoil he had caused, looked at the glowing water below and felt a sense of belonging. This planet, this princess, and the creatures around them, all of it felt alive in a way he had never experienced. Liara watched him silently, her mind buzzing with new and confusing emotions. She had always maintained control, always known what to expect. But this human soldier, he was unpredictable, bold, and yet respectful. He had disrupted the calm of her world not through force, but through courage, honesty, and presence. For the first time, Liara allowed herself to acknowledge it. She was quietly, undeniably, flustered. And in that quiet moment, with the twin suns dipping below the horizon, both human and princess understood that their journey together had only just begun. The morning after the crisis at the floating lake, the palace of Zephyria was calm. Yet the air seemed different. There was a quiet tension mixed with anticipation, subtle but noticeable to those who paid attention. Princess Liara moved through the halls with her usual grace, but her mind was unusually occupied. Thoughts of Ethan, the human soldier who had disrupted her ordered world, were harder to dismiss than she would have liked. Ethan, for his part, was awake early. His curiosity about the planet was insatiable, and after the adventure of the previous day, he felt more connected to Zephyria than ever. He was fascinated by the palace's architecture, the floating gardens, and the way the twin suns reflected in the crystal walls. Yet, he couldn't stop thinking about the princess, the calm, composed Liara, whose eyes held an unspoken depth he found both challenging and captivating. When he met her in the grand hall for the day's briefing, Liara's calm presence was a stark contrast to his human energy. "Today," she began, her voice steady and precise, "we will examine the source of the minor disturbances in the northern forests. The floating crystals there have become unstable." Ethan nodded. "Sounds good. I'm ready." Liara's gaze lingered on him, noticing the confidence in his posture, the way he observed his surroundings. He was human, unpredictable, and yet capable of actions that could surprise even the most disciplined of her people. She felt a small flutter in her chest, an acknowledgement she would not speak aloud. The group moved quickly through the crystal forests. The floating foliage and glowing streams gave the area an otherworldly beauty. Yet the instability of the crystals made careful navigation necessary. Ethan moved alongside Liara, his eyes constantly scanning for anything unusual. "This area is usually quiet," Liara said softly. "The northern forest is home to creatures that respond to even the smallest change." "Be alert," Ethan nodded, understanding both the caution and the implied trust. He felt a surge of responsibility not only for the task at hand, but for the princess who had placed her confidence in him. Suddenly, a series of low vibrations shook the ground. Several crystal fragments floated into the air, spinning unnaturally. The creatures of the forest emerged cautiously, their glowing bodies illuminating the area. The group froze. Liara raised a hand, signaling everyone to hold their positions. "Approach slowly," she instructed. Ethan took a careful step forward, noticing a faint energy pulse emanating from a cluster of crystals. "It looks like the same kind of interference from yesterday," he whispered. "Maybe something is causing it from below the surface." Liara observed him. His ability to assess the situation calmly yet decisively impressed her. "Your instincts are valuable," she admitted softly. Together, they navigated the unstable area. Ethan's human perspective complemented Liara's disciplined strategy. Where she analyzed patterns and movements, he reacted instinctively, adjusting to the shifting environment in ways her people might have considered reckless. Yet his actions were effective, and the crystals stabilized under their combined efforts. Once the immediate danger passed, the group rested near a crystal pond that reflected the twin suns like mirrors. Ethan leaned on the railing, his uniform slightly damp from the effort, but his expression was determined and proud. Liara stood beside him, quietly observing the human who had become more than a visitor to her world. "You handled yourself well," she said softly. Ethan smiled, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "Thanks. I couldn't have done it without you guiding me. You're calm. It's incredible." Liara felt a faint blush, almost imperceptible to anyone else. She turned her gaze toward the pond, speaking as if to herself. "Perhaps it is not just my guidance that matters." Ethan's attention shifted. "What do you mean?" Liara did not answer immediately. Her eyes scanned the horizon, the floating crystals, and the serene landscape. "You challenge me in ways I did not anticipate," she said finally. "Your presence. It unsettles me, yet it also encourages me to see beyond control and order." Ethan looked at her, genuinely curious. "Unsettles you?" "Yes," she admitted softly, the calm tone of her voice contrasting with the flutter in her chest. "You are human. You act with honesty, bravery, and spontaneity. It is disarming." Ethan chuckled, a warm and genuine sound. "I guess I can't help it, but I'm glad it has an effect." Liara allowed herself a small smile. She had maintained her composure in every aspect of life, but with Ethan, she realized she could relax just enough to feel human emotions she had long kept in check. As the group returned to the palace, Liara and Ethan walked side by side. Their conversation was easy, interspersed with quiet laughter and shared observations. For Liara, it was an unfamiliar pleasure to engage in dialogue that was not protocol-driven, that did not demand perfection. For Ethan, it was a rare honor to speak freely with a princess who treated him as more than a curiosity. Later, Liara invited Ethan to the palace observatory, a space filled with floating lenses and holographic maps of Zephyria and surrounding systems. The twin suns were setting, casting long golden streaks across the crystal walls. "Look at this," Liara said, gesturing to a holographic display. These disturbances, though minor, could have grown into serious threats if left unchecked. Your presence helped stabilize them. Ethan studied the display, then looked at her. "It feels amazing to be part of this." "To help," Liara turned to him. "It is not often that humans leave such a mark on our world. You have shown courage and insight beyond your species' reputation." Ethan laughed softly. "I didn't do it for a reputation. I just wanted to help." Liara's chest tightened slightly. His humility, paired with his bravery, struck her in ways she did not expect. She looked away, focusing on a distant star. "It is rare to find such sincerity," she admitted as night fell. The palace gardens were bathed in soft light from bioluminescent flowers. Liara and Ethan walked together, their shadows stretching across the glowing paths. You know, Ethan said after a pause, I never thought I'd end up here, on another planet, helping a princess stabilize floating lakes and crystals. Liara's lips curved in a subtle smile. Neither did I imagine a human could so quietly unsettle my world, yet leave it in better balance. Ethan laughed, shaking his head. Well, I guess life is full of surprises. Liara paused, turning to face him. Yes, she said softly, and perhaps some surprises are worth embracing. Ethan's eyes met hers, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. They were different, human and Zephyrian, but they had found common ground through trust, courage, and respect. Liara's calm exterior, so often unshakable, had been tested and softened by his presence. Ethan, with all his unpredictability, had become more than a guest. He had become a companion, a friend, and perhaps something more. Days passed, and their bond deepened. Ethan learned the subtleties of Zephyrian customs, while Liara discovered the value of spontaneity and candidness. The palace, once a place of strict order, became a space where laughter, conversation, and shared discovery flourished. One evening, during a quiet ceremony honoring the stabilization of the northern forests, Liara publicly acknowledged Ethan's contributions. Her voice was calm, her expression poised, yet there was a warmth in her words that had not been there before. Human soldier Ethan, she said, addressing the assembly, has shown bravery, insight, and honesty beyond expectation. His actions have preserved the balance of Zephyria and reminded us of the strength found in courage and sincerity. The crowd murmured in approval, and Ethan, usually modest, felt a surge of pride. Liara met his eyes, and for the first time, he noticed the subtle acknowledgement of her admiration. Later, away from the ceremony, they walked through the palace gardens in silence, the twin moons rising above the floating lakes. Liara paused, looking at Ethan. You have changed my world in ways I did not expect. Ethan smiled. And you've changed mine. Liara's calm expression held, but inwardly, she felt the flutter of emotion again, a quiet, comforting warmth. The human soldier, with his courage, honesty, and unpredictability, had unsettled her in the most extraordinary way. As they stood side by side, watching the reflection of the moons in the glowing lakes, both understood that this was just the beginning. Their worlds, though different, had intertwined. Trust, respect, and admiration had blossomed between them, promising future adventures and shared discoveries. And for Princess Liara, the once unshakable calm had been quietly, unexpectedly, and delightfully flustered by a human soldier who had walked into her world and changed it forever.